Hey everybody, thanks for joining Low Code Approach. Today we are joined by Andrew Gaskins. He's the Power Platform lead over at Lumen Technologies, and the topic we're going to cover today is communities and Power Platform communities. Now, Andrew's led the Power Platform global admin community, which is amazing, and I highly recommend everybody checks it out, and we'll put those notes in the show notes of how to get there. But first, Andrew, can you please tell us a little bit more about the global admin community?
Sure. And thanks for having me, Sean. This is always nice to talk to about community and what it means and growing for those of us who support it. And that's kind of where the Global Power Platform Admins User Group originated, was the idea that we have a lot of user groups which do really great work, but they're really more for the maker, for the end user. And there wasn't one that existed for those of us who support it on a day-to-day, let alone being enough users or enough admins in any one town, save maybe New York City or London, I guess, that would also want to get together. So we set this up, rolled it out in June was our first time. We've had some amazing speakers from Microsoft who've come and talked to us about COE kit, about ALM, about managed environments. But the idea with this community is that it's not just presentations. And so just last week, we had our first freestyle chat, and we kind of did a poll on it to see, what do people want to talk about? And we came up with two things. And first one was application lifecycle management. So ALM was the first one. And then the second one was automating governance. Some of the features, some of the things we do with governments. As you can kind of expect, the conversation went off the rails pretty quickly and ended up being an hour-long, really great discussion that I think will be useful for those of us who are in the group to also revisit, but are information that we're now able to take back to Microsoft, so as admins. And so I do think that that'll be valuable. The idea there too is that we've built out the Teams community inside of there, and areas where we can go and ask questions about COE, ask questions about ALM, things like that, even just comment on our experiences. So the idea is that it becomes over time a really useful knowledge base.
I really like how you started with the small rocks of automated governance and ALM. It's the first approach.
Yeah, we figured they were minor things.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Now that that's out of the way. So I also know that you lead the internal community where you work. And so can you give an approach of, how would a worker or how would a user, an IT admin, how does somebody become that champion and start a community, Power Platform community internally where they work?
We have the Lumen makers internally, and we have about 1,700 people who are part of that internally. Yeah, and it's really, really cool. That started out of kind of necessity of trying to pull communications together and getting people to understand how to use the Power Platform at Lumen. And so I think the first step in kind of getting that together was recognizing the need. We had a Teams channel already set up, or actually a team set up for O365 that some power users had set up before that. And we kind of came in and we started adding, the different channels based on, Power Automate, Power Apps, everything like that. And we had people start to just kind of organically show up and ask questions. And so we have, I don't know how it is at a lot of other companies, but at Lumen, we have people who are very inquisitive. So they embrace things quickly. So, and as a technology company, I think that's kind of expected. So we saw that kind of grow. We kicked off the Lumen Makers a year ago, last March. And that was kind of our entrance into building this community, formalizing this community, and giving people a voice and a place to present. And I think that's a big thing there too, was making sure that it was about the voice of the community and not about the voice of those of us who are leading it. And the idea is that it's based on inclusion. So we really wanted to make sure that everybody feels safe. Everybody feels heard in this, and there's never that question of asking, if I ask this question, how am I going to feel afterwards? And so that is, I think if you're building a community, you have to start on those principles. And you have to think of those even before you think about what's the technology. So that's kind of where we started.
No, that's a great point. That, making sure that, you've developed this great body of knowledge that people can, use as a resource. And also, if that question hasn't been asked yet, ask that question, regardless of where it stands in complexity or, in job role or duty. That brings up a good point about quality assurance of the content that is added. What tips or advice do you have to others building a community, fostering a community regarding, maintaining quality of the content that's added?
I think that comes back to that comfort level because again, you don't want to go and correct someone or, be that Reddit person, if you will. So part of it is it's watching the community, watching the discussions in the community, engaging when you can, but looking for accuracy. And when something doesn't look like it's accurate, or maybe it's something that doesn't necessarily fit within the confines of the company and the way that you work, it's that ability to go in and redirect. And I think it's almost a lot like, with a toddler, if you redirect, then there's not that embarrassment and there's not that side of things. So then I think you still have that conversation that occurs in those channels, but others see how it directs and how it got to that correct solution at the end.
Good point. I think like running some cognitive service to take a look at responses and anything that starts with actually, and then you just remove that.
Yes.
Very
cool.
It
was the 5 key phrases, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So when starting out the community internally, did you have to leverage any executive sponsorship to help guide a directive of getting more makers? You said where you work is full of inquisitive people and people want to succeed with the technology that they're using. Is that something that ever had to come across, trying to get an executive sponsor or a champion at that level, or was that not needed? Or do you have any advice for an organization that may need to lean on an executive sponsor?
Yeah, so I think that's actually a really good question because for us, like I said, it was so organic and it had taken hold that we felt we really better get our arms around this quickly. And then we brought it to our executive leadership and they saw what was happening. But as part of that, they also saw that we were tending to the garden, if you will. So, making sure that those gates are there, making sure that people understood the roles of accessing data or, how data should be used, those type of things, so that when we did talk to our executives, that concern is not there in the same way that it might have been if we just sprung it on them. And I think part of it is that if you are trying to convince your executives, part of it is going back with the data. And that's an area where I think like the COE starter kit is so important because you have that, definitive data that you can go back and you can say, hey, look, like for us, we saw that we're following the sun in terms of development. And we see the types of things that are being built and how they're being built. So then you can go back with that data and then you're able to enable your leadership or your executives in looking at that digital transformation using these tools instead of kind of scaring them, I think, getting them to understand it's a community and that you can work together and people do work together and they work across business units. They work across these areas to come up with solutions, which in the end just benefits everybody.
No, great point about that. It's really interesting. You can show the metrics about usage or improvement of usage of those applications and like better designs and people fostering, center of excellence documentation and how that works. But what about for organizations that are running into some bumps, right? Trying to get people to utilize the community and build out that body of knowledge. Do you have any tips for them as far as how they can get over any challenges, generalized challenges? I know there'll be, everything under the sun, but still just some generalized challenges.
Oh, I mean, training is such an integral part. I mean, if you can, partner with Microsoft to get some of that, to get people to, Microsoft Learn, any of those areas, YouTube, all the great people that are out there, that wealth of knowledge. I think it's easy to build that excitement once people see what they can do. Sometimes I find that, so, I teach app in a day, generally once a month, and we do that. We kind of went from the outside group teaching it to we did it, and that was really to tailor it just a little bit more. We're able to kind of move out some of the, the product side of things. It's like, we don't need to sell you on it. You already own it. And so we get them through that. A lot of times we find people are really, really excited. Sometimes we also find people are like a deer in a headlight because there's so much coming at you. And at the same time, it's like, wow, we can do all of these things. So I think part of it is like it's those brown bags. It's the training, it's the socializing, it's getting your internet department to talk about it. So those type of things. And I think once people start to see it, I think that generally creates that excitement. And I really do feel it's always like a groundswell. I don't think it's something that comes from, an executive mandate of, hey, we're going to go use this and we're going to do this. People, I think, have to naturally come to it and see and realize where they fit in. And that's the thing, is that once the business owners see the value and they see where they can address those needs, then I think that's where it comes. And it starts with the simplest thing, like a flow, all the way to then, a model-driven app, 6 months later is what we see.
Very cool. Very cool. So training is a huge component, right? And, everybody needs to get training and learn how to use the tools before them, right? Not everything is a hammer. You can't build everything with a hammer. So you have to, learn how all these tools interact. What about, maybe HR is governing the training aspects of these tools or any of the technologies within an organization. What other topic areas can be used to heavily promote engagement in there? Is there certain forums that work best? Is there, would you segment it into specific products like, Power Apps, Power Automate, PVA, and then one separated for admin? Or do you find it easier to kind of have admin intermingled across each one of the products?
Yeah. So admin's interesting because I think generally within any organization, it's a much smaller group. So that training is I think it's handled in a different way. One thing that we're looking at now is also, what is the environment level admin now? So it's not just the tenant or the Power Platform admin, but then there are these other components. But yeah, you bring up a really good point there about, do you hit it at the product level individually? Do you go over the whole thing? One area where we've had success is looking at kind of the 1 hour kind of introduction trainings, things like that. So, Power Apps, PVA, Power Automate. And I think that kind of gets the interest going. And then from there, you can kind of introduce those, half day or day long trainings that help them. But I do think it's ongoing training as well. And one thing that also is kind of the whole purpose behind our internal community, which is the makers, is to continue to share that knowledge and to build that knowledge base, just like with the admins user group. What we do is each month, we kind of talk about what's going on in the platform. We talk about what's happening at the company with the platform, but the bulk of our meetups each month is dedicated to the makers presenting what they've done. And I think that's the best way to get people excited about it, is because they see their peers doing these things. And it makes you feel like, oh, I can do this. This is someone who came at this 6 months ago with no experience, and now we have a productionalized app. And so I think that's a big component in getting people engaged.
No, it's a really good point. And you're right. That innovation fosters innovation amongst the makers, where they can build out these really robust applications. And it's good because they have somebody they can tap on the shoulder and ask, hey, how'd you do this? And how'd you do this right? How do you see community as a way for makers to communicate to admins as almost a learning method for what do makers actually need? So when when IT admins are building out data policies or formulating environment strategy, or there's some migration that they have to worry about from M&A or something, how do you find community is a good method for that, to kind of talk more about where we're at right now and kind of where we want to see the platform move towards and the governance that would be involved? Or is this more of a one-way conversation of admins kind of say this is where we're going and this is how you're going to use the product? Yeah,
so we try not to be typical IT. So we're doing this very unique thing, which is called listening. And it's working out really, really well. It's kind of layered, so we have these discussions and they happen in the broader community, but then we've identified our champions, and they're the ones that come from all the business units and all layers in the company. We have some directors who show up, we have makers, we have managers, we have this group. And they're the ones that we talk about the concerns with, but we also say, okay, what are your concerns? And we listen and we try and pull that in and understand, and then take that back. And once we've digested it, you figure out, okay, we have probably been too rigid in this area, and we can kind of let up a little bit on that to help. The other thing is just not getting to that reflex, again, as IT, of the reflex no. And so, again, trying to just listen, trying to be part of the conversation. I think that's it. It's be a part of the conversation, know what the guardrails are, and then know, how do we do this?
Very, very cool. So I've got one last question. How does one go and sign up to join the Global Power Platform Admins group?
So you can go to the Microsoft user groups. I believe that's it. And then you can search for the Global Power Platform Admins user group, and you'll see us in there. We've got a couple already set we're almost full up for the first quarter of next year. So that's really exciting. And we're getting some really great speakers and really great topics. So you can look for that. So again, Global Power Platform Admins user group on the Microsoft user group page, and you can sign up there. And then once you do sign up, then you can you'll have a link to join the team. And there you'll have access to the Microsoft Teams and channels and the conversation with all of us.
Andrew, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for your time. This is such a huge topic and so much involved with it. And I'm glad that you were able to teach us all about community, how to establish one, and how to nurture and maintain one too. Thank you once again for all your time, and love having you over here.
Thanks, Sean. I appreciate it.